board minutes from July's meeting. Any amendments, changes, anything to discuss? Is there a motion to approve? So moved. Second. Any discussion on the minutes? Chris?
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mike.
Yes. List of claims.
Put them all into one instead of two separate ones.
Okay. There were 2 Elon claims. Did submit one in July. Any questions on claims? Discussion.
Was the key data students?
Admin days, all the administrators got to home. A few days for like network.
Well, that means no.
Oh,
Any other questions on claims? Is there a motion to approve all of the Elon service claims?
I'll make that motion. Second.
Any last minute questions? Discussion? Chris?
Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes. Is there a motion for the Elon service claims? So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Abstain.
Bob,
Yes.
Going down to informational item, the treasurer's report. Any questions on the treasurer's report? 4.2 is policy review.
Okay, last meeting, we tabled the policy 6037 selection review of library materials. You have 3 attachments in front of you. The first one is the original, we'll call it original red line that was presented last month. The second one is an alternate version based on some information from Mr. Privet as far as how it's been conducted in the past. The third one is a variation of the first red line version. So you've got 3 in front of you that we can discuss through and talk about, see what fits.
So my preference is version 3. Bob did that after our last meeting. I think that responds to what we talked about in terms of what we really need is a right to review or an appeal to the full board without putting a big burden on a bunch of people to read these books and weigh in. Let the administration do their job. If somebody is not happy, let them come to the board. It seems like a pretty simple, straightforward process, but ultimately it ends with us if there's a problem. So my preference would be version 3. But we're not taking action on this, right, until we get down to the action items?
No, I don't even have it on action right now.
Oh, that's right.
We'll take action next month once we decide our direction.
Thanks for doing that, by the way, Bob.
Any other questions?
Well, so I did look at the one that's currently, I think it's on the school website is where I found it, that David Privet helped write several years ago, and they've been kind of following, and so I threw that one out there too with slight modification to kind of make it, kind of meet up with what the idea of this third version of the policy was. So I don't know if we want to look at that one compared to the third version today, and be ready to move on those at our next meeting or something.
The only thing that stood out on that one to me is just, it's a more, it involves more people, right? Because now we've got to put together a committee which is made up of the media specialist, principal, one teacher, and a community member. They make a choice, then it goes to the administrator, then it comes up to the board. It just seems like that's an unnecessary step.
Yeah.
And it involves 4, 5 plus 6, 11 people ultimately end up reviewing it, when I think we can more efficiently get to the same place. I'm not opposed to it if that's right. I think we get there either way. I just think version 3 is a more efficient way to ultimately just get it up here to the board for decision making.
And it still includes the media specialist. and the
Yeah,
librarian and stuff,
absolutely.
So, yeah, so, all right, well,
Since now that we know it's 1 or 3, I give us a month to look at it.
I think it's 2 or 3.
There's
To
2.
the one that's labeled alternate version, right?
yeah.
Yeah. The first one attached, Mike, is the one we said last month. Required every book to come
You're
to a
right,
full
2 and
school
3.
board.
So between 2 and 3, next month we'll make a decision. Which one.
Any questions or discussion, clarification? 4.3, school district growth percentage.
Okay, this originates from LB 243, which I've shared a few times. It's school finance, so it's fairly complex, I'm gonna be honest. It's taken me a while to get my head wrapped around it. Essentially, what LB 243 did is it limits school district revenues, not tax asking, but total revenues, at 3% growth from last year. So it took the budget last year, or took the AFR last year, looked at those numbers, allowed 3% growth going into this year. There are other factors that include a slight percentage for student population growth, poverty, ELL, some of those pieces. So really our increase is 3.15 or 3.16%. But also what's allowable is an access of an additional 6% by a supermajority vote of the board, which is, for us, 5 out of 6. What I talked about was by voting to allow the increase, it doesn't mean that we have to access that increase. It just gives us the ability to. Plus, the way that it's written, it moves that baseline. As of right now, it would be the baseline next year. Even if we're not accessing it, that's where it would start as far as access to revenues. At 3%, when you look at school budgets, 80% roughly are probably staffing costs. And when we've talked about staffing costs, the increases from last spring till now, all of those are going to be in excess of 3%. Another 10%, 15% are fixed costs, your mechanical, your electrical, your water, some of those pieces. That's not going any lower. We still have those inflationary pieces. So 3% growth on revenue just by itself means that we don't have enough to cover our costs. I ran an initial budget, which I'll share here in a little bit. Right now, that initial run is in excess. It's not necessary to have the full 6% yet, but it is beyond that 3% that's allowed. So as a board, you guys are we're gonna have to talk through this. You guys are gonna have to decide, is that a direction we wanna go? Or are we going to sit on the allowable 3% and figure it out from there?
So Brandon, what you're saying is, just the initial numbers you ran,
Yep.
it's not, we don't need 6. It could be 4, it could be 5. But I looked at it, I looked a little bit today, so without that piece I didn't know about with the 0.016. So it's additional 374,000 above last year's budget, correct? Is that correct? With all three, with QP, Pub, general fund, and building.
So this only impacts building fund and general fund. Qualified cap is
Okay,
left
so it's
out.
318,000 from last year to this year, right? Would be the additional.
Total revenue is 300-some-thousand, 360,000, 70,000, something like that.
Somewhere in that.
Yep.
But that alone, that 3% will not, you cannot run a budget next year without.
My preliminary numbers, that's not covered.
Brandon, just to clarify.
Yep.
Okay, so you're allowed 3%. You can go up to a max of 6 or an additional 6 for a total of 9?
An additional 6.
Okay, so you could go to 9.
Correct.
Okay.
And I heard you say something in that you followed. Just because we can say the number's at 6, that impacts next year, whether we utilize it or not.
The way it's written right now, that becomes your baseline for next year. Whatever you are allowed, your allowable revenue.
Is there fear of something changing? Or, I mean, if we don't just pass it, we'll just move on
Sure.
now and try to do this next year? Is there fear of that not being an option?
My concerns would be the unpredictability of the legislature, not knowing what happens year to year. This is a fairly new funding mechanism, so if there are less funds available from the state, exactly what that looks like, concerns that I shared with wages, with cost, with some of those things, those would be the biggest ones that stand out.
So it would be, if we grew, the school district grew by 5% this next year or following year, and we stay at 3%, it would be really in the bottom.
Potentially, there's a growth aspect within that. There's a student growth aspect within the allowable growth, but how that percentage changes is a little unclear to me.
And what are we getting state aid wise?
Yeah,
New formula.
that
You gotta take
is-
that into consideration.
Yep, absolutely. Just a second. State aid will be 1.7 million this year,
What did we get
which
last
is a
year?
good hike, 255,000.
So, I mean, that's a pretty big jump.
Correct.
And what do they mean by school district revenues? What are our revenues?
Yep, so it takes into account any non-property tax revenue, whether that's in your general fund or your building fund. That could be like homestead exemption, we can't budget for that, but that comes in, your property tax credit comes in. Trying to see what else is on here, non-property tax revenue from your AFR, your special education estimates, because we get reimbursed on the special education side, and then it takes into account foundation aid, which is that state aid that I'm talking about.
Brandon, can you tell me just how this process works? So will this be, as currently written, will this be an annual process where we can revisit this? And then assuming we do or don't approve it, assuming we do approve it, we still have to approve a budget that either says use 3% of it, or use 2% of it, or use 5% of it. Is that kind of the process, and is that an annual process?
Yep, fair question. The guidance that we get from the NDE regarding this is once the board approves it once, then we're okay going forward. It's not something we'd have to do year after year after year, but the board still has to approve a budget. So let's say in 2 weeks at a special meeting, you guys decide to adopt a resolution that says, yes, we have the ability to access the 6%. It doesn't mean you're going to access 6%, and you still, as a board, have the ability to dictate what that budget looks like before it's approved.
And if we were to not approve it this year, can we revisit that next year?
Yes, as of right now.
What you're saying is whatever we accept this year, that's our baseline for next year's growth.
Correct, as it's calculated within
So
our
whatever
formula.
this new number is, that's the 3% we'll look at next year, and then without going above like an additional amount.
That's the way it's written today. I'm not saying that won't change. I can't predict that.
Same with state aid, we don't know if we're gonna get
Correct.
year to year in state aid.
Do you foresee a lot of other schools having similar issues with budget concerns going forward?
As being our size.
It depends what you define as budget concerns. I think a lot of people are going to struggle with this because it's so new and it's impossible to predict. At least with the former TIOSA formula being the only source of state aid, it was somewhat predictable as far as a percentage. This is all new, and it's being based on 2 years ago, and don't quote me on this, but 2 years ago, special education, last year a different piece, and this year's budget in calculating these numbers numbers. So you're not even drawing from the same budget year. You're drawing from 3 different places, and how that impacts going forward, I don't have a clue. I do know in 2 years, the special education piece that we're getting on top of right now folds back into the formula, and all of a sudden, it's not an extra, it's a piece that has to be counted. That reimbursement.
So by saying that this is non-real estate tax money, then this won't increase our levy or any taxation?
It's inclusive of everything, property tax included. All of those other pieces are pieces that go in that are not property tax to spend.
Okay.
On my first run, just very rough, I would guess part of it is valuation going up, but part of it is tax asking going down. I don't anticipate us having to participate in the postcard bill for increasing taxes. I think our taxes are going down, and I think our levy will probably decrease double digits. Even if you were to access all 6%, I still think the levy probably goes down double digits. I haven't run that number yet, that's just a guess.
And that is mostly due to the different way that we're going to be funding our public schools going forward.
Part of it is valuation went up, because valuation went up, let me pull that number. Our valuation went up 9.6%, so that has a part of it, but it's also because we're getting additional revenues outside of property tax that we're able to lower.
But we will have to make it
Yes.
Say that again. What do you say that?
SPED is going to fold back in those reimbursement funds.
Fund special items.
It will be reimbursed, but it
On the
folds
various.
back in, yeah, it folds back into the formulas instead of being on top like it is right now. What other questions do you have? So I got one more piece on this. Okay, so this, ideally, before a budget would be completed, you guys would have a decision on if we're going to access any or all of available through resolution. The problem is budget is due to the county by September 4th or 5th. Talking to NDE, it just has to be approved before the budget's submitted. Ideally, constructing the budget, we have an idea of what direction we're going to go. If there's some latitude, 0 latitude, all latitude, because I've got to have that done here in the next, 10 days, 15 days. But there should be a resolution placed before you guys that you vote on it if you want to access any of that. Does that make sense? It's a huge time crunch, but the thought was to have this conversation now that we have valuations we get August 20. So I really don't have an idea what anything looks like till August 20. Here we are August 21 and we're having to try to make a decision. It's not an action item tonight, but if you have any direction for me, I'm all ears.
Brandon, can you just clarify what you just said? You said we have to make a decision on whether to access. Do you mean whether to approve the potential override or to access in excess of 3% in our upcoming budget? What does the word access mean in that sentence?
To me, it is having the availability of the funds to exceed the 3%, not, I don't think it requires an absolute number. Because like I said, right now I've run that first rough draft of the budget. It's in excess of the 3%. It's not all of the additional 6%.
But it's within that budget, you've earmarked the 1.8 million from the state. You're still going to be short. What's driving that? What's driving that?
Because it's solely a revenue. So whether it's taxes, whether it's extra money coming in, it's 3% increase. So if we increase 3% revenue.
Right, but you told me earlier though, we didn't get 1.8 last year in state aid, we got
Correct.
225.
So that's 1.4 million, that wasn't in our budget, that we're gonna now throw onto this year's budget.
That's offsetting the taxes. So last year we asked for more taxes. This year we would ask for less taxes because you've got more state money coming in.
So we're gonna ask less than the levy says, right? So what our levy is now, we're asking for less tax dollars.
Right. So it's 3% revenue growth over last year, regardless of where it comes from. But when you look at staffing being such a large cost, when you look at the teacher contract, when you look at our classified staff, when you look at administration, those total packages were in excess of 3%.
So let's just run this. So last year, we, for our district, from a property valuation for tax dollars, was $1,153,833, okay?
Correct.
This year, it's $1,307,000, million, whatever it is,
Right.
124. So we have an additional, basically, what? I do my math, what is that, a couple, 2-3 million more?
115 or so.
A million more.
Mhm.
Okay. So, but we're gonna ask for less than that. We're gonna ask,
So what we asked for in taxes last year, I anticipate us asking less this year.
so what's that number?
Okay, I don't know that yet.
How do we not, how do we not know that number?
I have a rough draft, but again, it's going to be dependent on different pieces.
So we have to take less money if we, the more state you get, the less asking you get to take.
Unless it's an override, correct. Unless you would vote to access the additional percentages.
Right, just the levy alone changing, the number of property value going up, you just use our 0.889256, that's still gonna give us, you know, even with the growth, it should give us more. Or you could, but it can't because we only can go 3% above last year, correct?
Correct, as the starting point.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep,
And just one more point of clarification.
sure.
So 3% includes the additional state aid.
Correct.
So we take that additional 1.4 million, and then we're
It's within the
limited.
3%.
Okay, and then we're capped on any portion of that additional valuation because we can't have more than 3% unless we do the override.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So basically, we're just taking last year's at 3% from last year,
And that's the total revenue number as the beginning point.
right now.
Yep.
And that is, if we take out, it's like 12,272,282.
When you account for building fund and general fund,
Yep.
because it impacts both, last year, total revenue was 14,636. This year, the beginning point is roughly 15.1 for total revenues.
So revenue.
Yep.
So there's additional.
That's tax asking and non-tax funding.
So that's what we get, just going off what you just said, that's what we
At
get.
3.159 because of those other tiny pieces
So
in
we'd
there.
add that to that percentage to the total.
From the 14.6, and that's how you get to 15.1.
So what was our total budget last year?
Our total revenue was 14,636.
What will it be this year, just by simple math, with that plus the 1.5?
The 3.15 is 15.1. That's the total revenues, general fund, building fund.
And that increases are going to, what, just give me that budget item, do you think that this is why it's gonna, we need additional money?
Special education in general,
Okay,
staffing and benefits costs. Those are the two major ones that I see.
okay.
I think you're also going to see an increase in, I don't know, what your fixed costs, your water, your sewer, your electrical, all those things are going up. A very, very, very small portion of our budget is consumables, those things that are used on a yearly basis that you might get rid of. 80% roughly of the budget is people. And the levy rate will still go down.
In addition to the staffing, what's the next two biggest budget items? You might have said this.
After staffing, it's going to be those fixed costs. Yep.
Is our, trending over the last 5-10 years, have our fixed costs gone up?
Percentage-wise, no, but dollar-wise, yes. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I can get them to you, I'm sure. Yep.
The Cuba, how much longer now?
Qualified cap, if you give me just a second. I want to say 2032 off the top of my head. Maybe 2034.
So right now, we owe about 2.3 million, what it says, it's still owed to it.
2.144 is the number I see. That was last year's number that you have in front of you, probably.
And that's for what?
Qualified cap, I think it was used for the PLC. It's a zero interest deal.
Give us an idea of time frame, since like over the next 10 days, we have to have another meeting.
If we have to have another meeting, it's probably 2 weeks away because we've got to advertise and do everything just like a regular meeting, which would put it on September 4th, which is Labor Day, which moves it to the Tuesday, and I would have to talk to the county and find out.
When's the budget due by?
Well, that's what I gotta talk to the county by. The budget itself, the submission to the state, to the auditor, to all those people is September 30th. But for the postcard bill requirement, basically you've gotta be done with it by September 4 or 5, whether you're participating or not.
We can't have it Friday after.
We could, but the issue is advertising ahead of time.
So Brandon, what happens if we miss that postcard window?
I can find out. I don't have an answer.
We got to figure a way to redo this, reevaluate this. I mean, it's putting all boards, not just us, in
Yeah.
a really tight
Well,
position.
and this is fairly new. This was in the last
Right.
couple of years that it happened, but the timeline still don't make sense.
We're sitting here on our meeting on August and expect to make a decision on lots of money tonight.
And just so happens it's the late Friday.
Yeah.
Do you get a sense from peers in other school districts that you work closely with, are they being proactive as well, or are they going to be more reactive?
Now, I would say, clarify for me.
Are they looking to do similar?
I would say a majority are. It's probably hit and miss as far as whether it's a full 6. There's 5, 6, and 7% that's available depending on your student population. I think it varies exactly how much of a percentage they might do, but I would say a large majority are at least allowing that possibility.
So it really comes down to, do we want to tie our hands, or do we want to exercise our control on the budget side? Right, I mean, because if we don't vote to override, 3%, doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter what comes up, we're kept. Versus, we have the flexibility, but we don't need it, so we're not going to use it.
Right. And
And we do that in the budget process, budget approval
right.
process.
I would say once you make that decision, let's say that we stick at the 3%, we don't do anything, that becoming the baseline, there's no way to catch that up in the future.
No. So then, if we take 5% addition, whatever, just fill in a number.
Sure.
We don't have, you just need to let them know, we're looking to go above the 3 to another 5, basically 8%. That doesn't mean that the final budget, we have our meeting, we have to still, that 5%, we can't go and say, no, we don't need that much, we only need.
No, you can you absolutely have that ability.
Yeah, we
Oh,
can
then I
say no.
Oh, then okay, that was,
No, the budget is completely up to you. If
but we just gotta let them know in the postcards that we're asking for not just 3, up to 3, we're gonna ask for additional, whatever, say 5, that's 8%.
correct, it's for the lid computation form, one of the forms I have to turn in with the budget. It has specifically on there, it does not allow me to turn it in if my revenue side is too much So I have to put in that there was a vote, an override.
So then we go to our September meeting, you bring us an actual budget, and we don't need, the 3 would have been fine. Just say,
Possibly.
if it is, we can approve that.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
I feel better.
That's a lot.
Lot more clear.
Otherwise, if we just say,
You
nah,
know
let's
that,
pass the
you know that
money.
full-time hour? No.
If we punt on it, then my hands are tied, it's 3%.
Yes.
Bingo.
This way, at least
We can talk about it next month, the actual budget. Okay, yeah.
So here's what would help me with the budget is kind of highlighting those things that would not have made it into the budget had we not approved an increase.
Sure.
So that'd be really good detail. I think.
Okay.
Stuff that would have been.
Is it safe to say that as we project the school, well, schools getting bigger, but as population increase, we're going to be limited at 3% to hiring staff, proper staffing for it?
If you just went to 3%, yes.
And we're keeping staff.
And we're getting,
Yeah, I mean, setting that baseline, capping it at 3 and setting that baseline when we have control over the budget itself every year, and we can say, absolutely not, we don't need 6% or 5%, we only need 3.5%. We lose that power though, if we cap at 3.
In this meeting,
Yeah.
we actually get the budget in front of us, then we.
Yeah. 2 different things, I think.
So then I agree, then I think, in my opinion, I think we take the whole 6 and make it, for now, so we can put a postcard that way we've got a budget we can look at, all of us prior to the meeting.
And just to clarify, does that go in the postcard or only if we go in excess of 3% in the budget itself?
Only if we're going in excess of 2% tax asking above what we did last year, which is why I feel pretty confident saying we won't have to participate in the postcard bill meeting, because we're not going to go in excess of our taxes at all. What's unclear is everybody's got to turn their stuff in, so the clerk and the assessor know we are participating, we're not participating. What happens if we don't turn anything in because I don't have the budget itself done?
Right. So that's the gamble, is
That-
that postcard piece?
I'll ask for clarification.
We can't have a meeting on that. So what do you need from us then? What do you need from us?
What I need is, do you want me to continue working on the budget like I would any other year, or do you want me to cap it at 3% and be done? That's all I need for tonight.
Let's say work on it.
Work on it over there here.
So then what we'll have to do is we'll have to schedule, I would say, a special meeting just for resolution's sake, to adopt a resolution to say, yes, we would like to have the ability to access whatever percentage you put on it between now and the time that the budget's approved.
But that wouldn't get out before you meet until then,
It would not, but
correct? But what's the point of having it if we're sending it out anyway before we have the meeting?
Well, like, I think the difference, we're talking about like 3 different things here. The only way we would need to do the postcard process is if we were gonna ask for more taxes.
Right, but what I'm saying is, I don't care about, we're already saying,
I'm going to ask for clarification from the
Yeah,
clerk.
okay.
If we're not going to participate, do I have to turn the whole budget in, or can I just say we're not going to participate?
That's what I was.
I thought you said it wasn't due till the 30th.
The budget itself's not due till
But
the
this-
30th.
This has to be in by.
The postcard submission is due like the 5th-ish
Okay.
of
That's why
September.
That's why I'm saying, we don't need to do a special meeting. You're gonna get clarification to do a special
Yeah.
meeting. Perfect.
when we have to have that special meeting date set in order to get it into advertising all that.
We would probably have to advertise starting this Friday, because if we would have to do a special meeting, it would probably be on that Tuesday right after Labor Day, because that's probably when it's due for postcard purposes.
And advertising by Wednesday, is that the deadline?
Yes, but yeah. I like to get
Any other discussion? Administrative reports.
Your
That is me.
Your peers have really,
Would you?
left you out to grab these last meeting.
That's all right. I've got a few things here. Some of it's pretty general things for our August meeting, but pretty pertinent to share. So, district assessment brochure, it highlights all of the assessments, screeners, etc. That will go out along with a copy of the assessment calendar, gives dates, rough timelines within, like generally 2-week windows when those assessments occur. Usually the teachers send out something more specific if they like through Remind or through communication with their specific classrooms to tell them when those things are happening. So that will go out to families this week. It'll be shared via all social media accounts, and then hard copies we keep on hand in the office for new families or new parents or just somebody that stops in and wants a copy of that. So we keep copies of those things as well there. Also within that, it's currently accessible on the website, the district website, but it'll just be updated. So again, something that we just continue to do annually. NSCAT's growth, this is a state assessment for 3rd through 8th graders, and then NSCAT's ACT, which is the 11th grade state assessment. All of that data has been released internally for district review. It is still embargoed, however. If anybody was watching the state board meeting 2 Fridays ago, they did share cut score information. That is the scale score, the actual numbers, the raw numbers don't change, but percentages of proficient or advanced or progressing, those types of things, those things change. In the past, it used to be an annual process. They tried to find something more that's fixed, though it was due for review. So those were presented to the state board, I believe 2 Fridays ago, and those did significantly, in a positive way, impact our data as well. So I hope as soon as that is not embargoed anymore, I would be able to share. If any of you would like to see that internally, I can share individually with you as well. Ahead of time, or if you wanted to see it after the board meeting, I could share it with you there as well. So, but ACT and NSCAT's growth both look very good. I'm hoping that is cleaned up or clarified. They'll give us release here at the end of August, maybe in September, so it shouldn't be too long. On that note, when we get that data, map data, all the financial pieces done, the budget's finished, we create a district community report card that gets sent out also to school community members, and then also copies are held on hand in each of the building's offices for new families who are visiting, etc. But that's just that report that lists, successes in extracurriculars and academics, and some of those just highlights the kind of the things that we have going on in the district. So that I'm hoping that I will be able to present that at the October board meeting as well. I included our school improvement goals there. You'll see the district goal. These are unchanged over the last several years, but committees meet in the summer. Each building, high school, middle school, and elementary school has a continuous improvement team or a building leader team. Those teams meet in the summer. They discuss kind of the status of that data that they have that, I can't share quite yet, but kind of how things are going. Are the things that we have in place working? We have Title IIA federal dollars that come in that we use for professional development and whatnot. Those needs that are highlighted in that, it's essentially like a needs assessment. Those things get highlighted, and then those are earmarked for spending. Over the past few years, our professional development money has predominantly gone straight to teacher stipends for additional prep time or work, curriculum revisions, pacing guide renewals. So by and large, we're not attending a lot of workshops outside of this. Teachers have full understanding if they would like to go somewhere, they request that, but a lot of those funds are being spent internally on our staff, trying to get them the best, whatever that they need for those specifics. PD, new teachers will be meeting with administrators on September 20th. It's our first early dismissal day. We'll look at, just kind of review how things are going and talk about instruction model. If any of you would ever, I would just say, like to come to those meetings as well, pop in, please. There's always an open invitation. This meeting will actually take place at 1:45 on September 20th. Some of them are at 7:20 in the morning. We meet before school for a few minutes. So there, if you're interested in that, please just let me know. I'll gladly include you on those meeting schedule invites and whatnot. So high ability, our high ability learner program, we are participating in a Restore grant. Rural, I can't remember what the acronym is. ESU2 staff is really good at creating acronyms, but it's a high ability learner focused process that's going to help us. Right now we're in the process of just reviewing how we identify students. The state requires us to just identify. So there's a formula that we create. We create internal parameters, what it means to qualify for high ability, what that looks like. Predominantly it's been academic based. We'd like to really look at emphasizing and highlighting things like music, art, theater, some of those things that are a bit more abstract, I guess, in judging, right? So it's really easy to set a number and say, if a student is at the 95th percentile in math and reading, they qualify for HAL, which is essentially where we're at. But through this grant, we're going to use it to kind of highlight some of those other things that we don't have in place. The funding mechanism for HAL is minuscule, negligible, almost non-existent. So if we identify 60 students as high ability learners in our district, we recoup maybe, I don't have the numbers directly here, probably less than $60 per student for programming, resources, materials, professional development, all of those things. But then it's a matching funds grant. So if we are qualifying for $3,600, then the district has to say we're going to spend at least half of that to get $3,600, which I feel very fortunate that this district is very committed to that, and we have a half-time staff member. We have a line item budget for those things, so we far exceed kind of the basic requirements or expectations of the program. And I appreciate Brandon's leadership with that too. It's one thing to identify, but if we can't serve the students that we're identifying, then what's the point of identifying more? So we're trying to find, through this grant with ESU2, they're going to provide some coaching. They're going to provide some people that will come and work side by side with us to kind of talk through and work through that, what that might look like. You'll see, we have so the letters then for how will go out, newly identified, and then those who are already identified or ongoing. Those letters will be mailed out by Mrs. Adams here shortly. And then screening is just ongoing. So every assessment window, or if parents come in or teachers recommend, all of that stuff just constantly is happening. So we have kind of sometimes that some bigger things happen, but generally, if a parent, which we have parents who email or they call and they would like to talk that through, we do that all throughout the year. Also, I didn't have this at the time when I wrote my report, but do you remember last year the ESU Coordinating Council had through Governor Ricketts had set aside some monies for like technology or robotics, kind of CT STEM products, and the ESU Coordinating Council had told the districts that there was X number of dollars available. We applied back then. I remember sharing with the board. We received about a little over $8,000 worth of drones, robotics kits, coding kind of robots and things. The robotics kits are more like, if anybody remembers, like the erector sets, where you have to build them and put them together, and you can create different types of robots. That's the kind of the form and structure. So we kept at that and kept in contact with the folks who set that up initially. We were only approved for about half of our request initially, and they came back to us and said, we have leftover funds. We'd like to fund all the rest of your requests. So we just had 5 more robotics kits come in, probably another $8,000 to $10,000 worth of material that just arrived recently. So Mrs. Everling at the library media at the elementary is coordinating some of those things down there with coding. They're very basic block coding, themes of like communities and maps and things, and have to program the robot to navigate that. But so she's going to be working with some of our middle school science staff in the coming weeks to kind of just take stock of where these materials we have, since they just kind of, I said, like fell out of the sky. So just a very happy surprise, right, that they showed up. So and then we're going to look at how we best utilize those going forward. On that note, I'm going to set up a drone cage in the learning lab. So we have a cage, internal kind of netted cage to keep them hopefully a little bit safer and don't break them. We've had a few parts that our middle schoolers have been used in the tail end of last year. And a few little pieces kind of broke off. So we're hoping we can get that fixed. You also have in the report last year's SendCap data. So we had this is a dual credit partnership through Southeast Community College, and you'll see that there. So we had 112 students, juniors and seniors enrolled, 65% out of 172 total juniors and seniors. This course is completed, so these students received A through D or passing grades of 352. Courses completed, average GPA of 3.49. Passing rate of C or above was 95%. 51% face-to-face courses with 49% online. And then 17 of those students enrolled at Southeast. That's from 2021-22, so dual credit students who enrolled the following academic year. We did have 17 enrolled there. Over 1,000 credit hours completed and an estimated savings of a little over $68,000 for our students. We did also, I think I can share this. We did also get, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's a kind of a tuition break that was reported for our students. It sounds like it's for sure for this year. Didn't really get a reason why, didn't really hear an explanation, but just that tuition amount for Wahoo High School students will be quite a bit less than what it was in the past. But most likely then that would next year go up again, back probably more in line with what it was in previous years. And then 11th grade English, our Committee on Curriculum and American Civics met on August 9th. We hired a new English 11 teacher, and we met on August 9th. She had brought forth a proposal, a new scope and sequence, a proposal for some new books to purchase. It was a very good meeting, very productive meeting. After conversation, what I guess down in the action items though is initial approval of the first 13 weeks, and I apologize for this in the meeting. It seemed like it was a very short amount of time to discuss, a very short amount of time to, I think have some of those conversations. Unfortunately, in the summertime, just the initial meeting had happened right at about the same time as the July board meeting, and then I was out of the state for other reasons, and we just didn't get that there. So at least the initial feeling, and what I'm going to bring to the committee, to the full board here in the action items, is approval of a 13-week plan, the first 13-week plan, which will also give us some time, which was the original 13 weeks that were proposed. And that'll give us some time as a committee to kind of meet. And also, I think what I would like is a little more clarification, from the board as a whole, in terms of maybe how we want all of this to look going forward. Because obviously you can hear, my wife tells me this all the time, you like to talk too much, but I get really excited and passionate about like what we do. But I also want to make sure that we're utilizing that time effectively, right? And we're not getting too far into the weeds maybe when certain decisions have to come before the full board, whereas a 50% committee, which there are 3 members, make some recommendations. I guess I would just like to know kind of how you want that to look going forward. So that, I know we can maybe get into that part of the conversation, a little bit later, or if you want to talk now, I don't know, but so that process, I know while it hasn't looked like that in the past, is something that I would envision that the members of that committee, Americanism and Curriculum, meet when we have I would like to propose, this is where I get a captive audience though, right? So where we have new standards that come in, what does that look like for us? What does that potentially mean for us? Where we can have those conversations and then be, I feel like this is a great opportunity to get some of that information more quickly out into the public, where it's one thing if I'm standing there talking to folks, but if, in more numbers, there's greater power, and we can have those conversations, just get the right information out there. So I guess that's where I'm kind of looking, but I do think that it would be good to have that discussion and kind of consider, are we going to make I wholly believe making decisions about, obviously there's a policy about library checkout and books, or what kind of books, that's important. But, are we going to make decisions on, do we dissect a starfish or a fetal pig? I mean, is that something we hold a curriculum committee meeting for? I don't know. I mean, I certainly am already having those conversations and thinking about those things. If there's 3 other people in the room, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine with me. I don't have any problems with that. But I just would like to know, like, is it for every single decision? Is it at the micro level of change, within lesson plan design or unit plans? Is it big picture? So I think that just helps all of us kind of, move forward, make sure everybody knows, kind of what that process looks like.
And Josh, we're all learning.
Yeah.
But to say this is something we can probably work together to figure out how it's going to look, because we've never done this before.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate it. I think
it's
it's candidness of the board in that, in that process. I do think it's super positive, and I think it'll be a really valuable process going
But
forward.
for me as a board member, now I can sit up here and I can understand what your logic was with certain books and all that. And we asked about classics, and you said, well, it's going to be next year. Well, that wasn't ever said to us. So the more transparent we can be as a committee to each other, will make it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess I'm just curious about that. Because when you start getting into that minutia, that's precisely why we've hired teachers and administrators and professionals to make those decisions. Like, so help me understand, why would we get into that level of detail when that's not in general what the board is elected to do?
So explain to me again now. Explain that again, Renee.
I'm just trying to understand, like, the role of why would the curriculum committee get into that level of minutia? And what are the qualifications? We've got experts who are making those decisions, generally bring that recommendation to us, and we rely on their expertise. So I'm just trying to understand why we would get that deep into the weeds as a board in light of what we're elected to do.
I think on this one, the biggest thing was we did not get a lot of information up front. We just got like the novels that were being proposed, and 5 of the 6 were new. I mean, written since 2000. And a lot of the classics were gone. And that was all we saw until we met. And then it was explained, how she was going to pull some of the things in. But personally, if I'm looking at it and saying, yeah, this all looks good, and I've never read 5 of the 6 books, and I'm not familiar, and yeah, I'm not an English major, and I would not know how to do a lesson plan for that class, but just looking at what we saw, it was a little concerning up front.
In what way?
Because the 5 of the books were, like I said, written after 2000, and so to me, a lot of the English that is written in that time period, which is current, it's easier reading than maybe some of the classics that are going to make you think a little deeper. And so that was my initial concern. So I've actually got the last 3 books I'm reading, so I would feel better having read them because I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, and I just, you know, Josh, to your point, should we dissect the starfish or should we?
Right.
Like.
Right, well, in
Why would
11,
we be weighing in on
English
this
11
stuff?
was always American lit. And none of the stories, well, I guess in Cold Blood is American, but all the rest of the books are foreign countries. I mean, there's nothing to do with America.
So have those been pushed to other years? Is 11
Well, they've
still
moved, and that
American?
was, they've moved some to senior, some to sophomore year. So some of those books weren't gone, but we didn't see that initially.
I think, I mean, just to interject here too, but the conversation was very healthy and very good within that process. And I mean, I think, you know, I asked specifically Mrs. Larson questions about, you know, what if we have parents who object or parents who feel like that, you know, this text has too challenging of issues or topics that they're uncomfortable with. I mean, you know, how might you handle that? And I thought she explained very, very, very consistently like what she would do, right? She already has alternative books. She already has matching text. She has strategies that she will utilize within the classroom that students don't know what or why something is happening, right? They are just busy engaged doing the things that all the other kids are doing. And she says she can be very strategic with that. But I think too, I see, you know, some of those conversations in allowing her to also meet some of the board members and answer those questions. You know, like what would you do in this situation? How does this look? I mean, we have board policy that, you know, if a parent objects to something, this is the steps that you do, and we follow that. We follow those guidelines. So those types of things are in place, and I think it's a great sounding board to kind of come forward and say this is where we're at. I would hope that, you know, if it's one of those conversations where it's like, well, I don't really know what you're thinking right there, you know, or some of those things, I would at least like to have those conversations before we get to a full board meeting. You know, in a large setting, at least as you know, some sort of a filter, I guess, or at least it gives us kind of a feeling of where we're at. So, Mrs. Larson there were some recommendations for changes, you know, or not changes, I would say, but is there a way you can do this? And she said, absolutely, I can do that. I will get something back to you. So the linked scope and sequence that you see there in the agenda that's attached has those highlighted pieces that she went back in and are paired text. They're things that, you know, are maybe seen more as classical or deal with that common American, you know, maybe the struggle that we see or the fight to, you know, overcome obstacles. And she has added some of those things in. The initial timeline, though, when we met with the committee, is like what Di had said, is it was a very short kind of turnaround, obviously, to get to this meeting. So that's why the initial recommendation at least is just to approve the first 13 weeks, knowing then that the committee will meet again, sit down with Mrs. Larson, talk through kind of what the next you know, section looks like, and then we go from there. So I don't think we would be ready to have any of those conversations without her in the room. So once that additional meeting happens, then we would be able to bring more information back to the full board again. But I do think, you know, going back to that, I think, like Mike, what you said, I mean, just us working together to kind of figure out how much of this, what does this look like, you know?
We can agree to disagree, Renee, on it. If I'm going to vote on something, put my vote that I'm approving, I want to know what it is and what the books are. And this is new to us, and we'll tweak it. But if I'm going to vote for something, I want to know what I'm voting for. And just say, and Josh, I truly trust, but he gave great explanations, and I felt really good coming out of it. Because when I saw you sent me the text about the books, you know, I looked at the book and I had a common theme. They seem like a common theme. They're all newer. You know, it's American literature. So that's great.
No, and I agree, but to your point, the board has to vote.
Totally agree.
So
But we-
I want to
I
know
totally
all
agree.
of that
It's no
too, so are we
different,
gonna
it's
bring
no
all that?
different when you, in your guys' committee, you guys get together, you guys don't always agree, but, you know, you may think this, but then you give it to the whole board. This is the same situation, totally the same thing.
Right.
You get to hear it, and if you don't agree, you get a vote the other way. You say, no, I don't disagree, I disagree, I don't think it should be this way.
No, I guess what I'm saying, Mike, is I would also want to hear from Mrs. Larson. I want to hear why she's doing, why did you pick these? Why did you eliminate these? Right, because you get the benefit of that insight before you vote.
Right.
And I would also like the benefit of that
But again,
insight before I vote.
This is a new committee, so now if that's something that we need to do, we can do it moving forward. So if we don't want to vote on this, Renee, if you don't,
Oh, no,
Okay.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I want to understand how we're going to do it and how we're doing it going forward.
So-
Because I also want that information before I vote. But we already have a committee of 3, right? So how do we get that level of detail to the full
I think what we
board?
probably do is we make recommendations as to Brandon, because it's a committee. Brandon can get it to you guys, and then that gives you an opportunity to ask questions that you normally wouldn't ask because you wouldn't know.
And it's, we do have a standing item for board committee reports on our agenda, so,
Right.
you know, that'd be the time that you guys, or whomever, whatever committee would report on what their
Well,
meetings.
I think ultimately, at the end of the day, is we need to come up with a plan, how this committee's gonna interact. When are we gonna be meeting? Like you just said, is it gonna be for a new curriculum, or is it in the classroom you're doing?
And on that point, like, so we under the, so this committee is really a two-part committee. So generally boards have either an American Civics Committee and a curriculum committee, or in most cases, they'll combine those two committees together into a committee on curriculum and American Civics. Really, while the duties overlap, they're really also separate duties that they must perform. So we, under federal regulation legislation, we must have that Americanism committee must meet twice annually.
How many members are in that committee?
It's the same 3. It's the same 3.
How long has that been in effect?
So this is just
Just new?
recent
New this
recent
year?
legislation. So we normally have those vote at the board meeting. There, when we, one of the line items is, this is the part where we would take open comment for the Committee on American Civics, and there's generally no public comment at that time. And then it kind of like when you give the committee reports, then it just moves on to the next line item. But we would have, I would propose, you know, with the group that we would have one of our meetings prior to a board meeting, like at 5:30 or whatnot, depending upon what those things might be that we would look at. And then in order for this calendar year to satisfy statute, we would do another one in December, and then have another one at the end of in the spring, so that meets our first, you know, new year 2024, and then we would be back on a consistent time where we would have those 2 meetings. Generally, they would be at the same time every year. We would accept public comment, you know, either as a, you know, committee, we would decide at the beginning of the year or the end of the year. Usually at the end of the year in that American Civics Committee report, I give a status update of all of the items, you know, that meet with similar like the multiculturalism. Where are we at? Where alignment with standards, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that we can do with that, but also that's something that this committee would be charged with as well. But those things can happen simultaneously. That they don't have, those meetings can be merged into one. So it's not like we're having twice as many meetings. But
I guess here's my question. So because of the committee structure, we can only have 3 people. But in order to get that same level of detail, have all the questions answered, effectively, curriculum committee would meet with the teacher and or you, and then I'm going to have to go meet separately, is what I'm hearing you say.
I think, we're not allowed to have 4.
Unless we bring it to the board.
Right. My hope would be, you know, in some of those situations, I would absolutely feel confident with you requesting, obviously a timeline. The timeline impacts the decision for this situation. ideally, we would have this proposal, if it was for the 24-25 school year, we would have a proposal like this, or at least be considering by December or January. That gives us, right, February, March, April, May, to work through the process, and then possibly approve within reason time for us to get things ordered, get things online, get training, any of those types of things lined up, which usually for me is if we can get that stuff lined up by March or April, we're good to go for getting things set up for the following school year. So that is kind of what I would think we would look at as a proposal. Obviously, the committee would meet, and then we would invite the teacher or the board committee or staff or myself or whoever to share whatever those feelings are, and the committee obviously would give their feelings at that point too, and we can discuss without it being an action item, but under the committee reports.
So my suggestion would be the next meeting, we'll approve this first 13 weeks, we'll meet, and then have her come to the next board meeting when we've met again, and that way we can tell the rest of it, and then we can approve at that point, then every board member knows what's going on.
So are you proposing we don't?
No, we're approving,
the
no,
first
we're
13
approving, no,
weeks?
I say, once we approve the first 13 tonight,
Got it.
we'll meet again, and then we will be there. Josh, she can show up, she can present to the board, and now it's not even I think about the policy. You guys meet together. We don't know anything until the board meeting. We don't get we don't get an email from somebody saying, hey, these are the things. Look at, we see them the night of the board meeting.
Absolutely.
Right.
Mike, but you have all of the people who were involved in the discussion, right? So you're talking to a third party. The policy committee was just us.
Right.
So there isn't some third party to go gather information separately.
Right, but in advance, Renee, in a perfect world, what normally would happen is we would have this discussion, and I think in the past we've had this discussion where somebody comes and talks about the new math. I remember the math curriculum. You came prior to the
A presentation
yes.
is given.
So that's a perfect world. That's how it should be. It didn't work out this way because we didn't get it till, what, 2 weeks, week and a half ago? 2 weeks ago? So that's the difference. That's why we're here tonight saying let's approve this 13 weeks because we have to get the school year started.
So she will come and present to us before.
The next go around.
Yeah, so I think, when we get to those action items, the hope would be that we would be able to gain approval for those initial 13 weeks. In our last meeting, August 9th, we had talked about that same process. Then we would schedule another meeting with the committee, ask any additional questions, follow up with what changes, or any kind of additions were made. She, in looking at some things, had made quite a few substantial changes from her first proposal to the second proposal. So she had removed some texts from her initial proposal. Just in her words, she thought she was biting off a little bit more than maybe was reasonable to expect from the students. So by adding in those paired texts and some of those other pieces, she had taken off, I believe, the last 2 novels that she had in the original proposal. The second one that was just emailed out last week, I think, had those updated changes on there. But she was, fully on board with, weaving in some more of those pieces. But there's still discussion to be had. So I don't feel comfortable getting too specific on that. But I think, that committee will meet. We'll meet again with Mrs. Larson. And then at that point, I hope that we would have another recommendation we could bring to the board in September for whatever that might look like.
All high school teachers have syllabus.
They do.
And so we can, anytime there would be a potential major overhaul or something, we would get a copy of that anyway, hoping it still matches the standard, which is very important, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And that's what points the direction, right? Or those state standards, We say, you could get into debates about what is curriculum and materials. It's everything, right? I mean, it's the books, it's the materials, the resources, the conversations are had, it's videos, it's all those things. But all of those things need to align back to those state standards. Those things that the board approves, when they're newly approved at the state level, we approve those as is. That is our process. So I think that's part of what that curriculum committee is job is to do as well.
And is that what's going on here? Did the state adopt new?
There were new ELA standards, but this was more of a committee, like a team. The English language arts team, the high school team, met with a new teacher coming in. They met, they talked about their own strengths, they talked about things that they thought were where gaps were. And we could bring, I mean, if we wanted to, we could bring the full team in. I mean, that's, again, another decision to talk through. But they talked through those things, right? They moved some text here, 10th grade, 12th grade, and felt comfortable with Mrs. Larson moving forward with what she was proposing, or what is proposing, what she is proposing.
And what's the highlighted sections here? Are these?
Those are partner texts, so let me just pull it up so I can speak coherently. So the text in the green, in the top highlighted box, or that's the core text. So that's the centerpiece, if you would. All of the highlighted pieces are other excerpts or chapters or poems or letters or other resources that allow students or emphasize what we want from students is to be able to compare those things, make comparisons with text. So I read this text in this style, now I'm going to read something similar, but how do authors use specific literary tools to convey meaning or messages? So she is, some of the text would be maybe aligned, similar, some of them would be opposing, where this one might have this point of view and another paired text has this point of view. So those are the types of things that she has added in with the highlights. So those are some other resources that she had added in after the first conversation.
And before that conversation, that was not on here at all? Nothing was proposed?
She didn't have any, she did not have any sorry, I'd have to go back and look at it specifically. She had paired text, but they were different. So she did have some paired text, but they were just different. So she heard the concern of the curriculum committee say, is there a way to get more American authors? Is there a way to make this look like more traditional English piece where we can bring in some of those classical type what we would consider in that? And she said, yes, I can do that. I think this took her a day or a day and a half, and she had updated and said, these are other things that I would do that would meet the same intent that she's trying to meet, but also satisfy those questions. She was very I think pleased with what things looked like and where things were at. So
I think the yellow was what she had done after we met.
it is.
She changed.
Do we have a copy of what it looked like before?
Yeah, I can send that.
I'm just very impressed that she left her former school at such a high level in English and gave up a lot of her summer to accommodate the students involved, and then set the bar really high. So it'll be great.
I really appreciate all your time. I know that was probably the world's longest administrative report, but
close.
thank you.
Principal Superintendent. Thank you, Josh.
Mine will be shorter. Preliminary budget numbers shared, valuation up about 9.6%. As I run through the budget, my first rough draft, property tax asking down across all of the funds that we ask property taxes in, about $1 million right now. I spend most of my time on the general fund in budgeting because in the general fund, we still have to have some cash in the bank to get us through to tax periods. In every other fund, we just show that everything is expended as we go through because that's what's required. So a ton of my time is spent on the general fund. It's also our largest asking fund at this point. Levy, again, projected to be down double digits going forward. I will keep working through those pieces. I'll get you the information information asked of what happens if we just stick at 3%. What are we cutting out? I'll do my best to get that information to you guys by the end of the week. Are there any specific questions you have on the budget? Again, it's a rough draft. I got valuation last Friday, so it was a guessing game up to that point. Other things, Saunders County Education Agency, the agency we formed with ESU 2 has to have an annual meeting. They would like to do that sooner rather than later, the representation in ESU 2. Have we appointed a third member there? Okay. I will get some times and dates out to you guys, see what we can make work. Again, they'd like to get it taken care of instead of waiting until December. The requirement there is one annual meeting at a minimum. Start of the year's off to a great start. We've seen an increase in student enrollment. Not a fair comparison because we do it by September 30th, but if you take September 30th last year to what I looked up on Power School on Friday, we're up about 1% on student enrollment. One hiccup we've had is a little bit with transportation, just because, well, several reasons. One, we're down a driver right now, so we've had to combine some routes. Two, it seems like we have more kids in town. Is that fair? One of the buses is fairly stacked with kids in town that we're trying to accommodate for. The third portion with construction and unpredictability, we can't access the north lot. Some of you guys have been getting those messages. So we're loading the buses out front, which means we're having to move parents around. It's not ideal, but it's not impossible either. They're minor hiccups. Feel really good about where we're at. Going forward, I just hope people are flexible, understanding. Who knows what happens with construction. Hopefully it stays dry here for a little bit. They're probably in the neighborhood of a week and a half behind just because of all the rain in July. They anticipate catching up pretty quick. If you've been by the site, you can see the walls are starting to go up. We're starting to see some form. I would anticipate they try to get it closed in before the winter just so they can do a ton of work inside. I was scheduled to have an OAC meeting today, owner, architect, construction manager. That got canceled because of some illness. So I don't have an update for you on the 5-week look ahead quite yet, but as soon as I get that, I'll share it.
How's the process going for you, Brandon? I mean, you're having to manage a big project in addition to all the other stuff. How's it going?
Having Russ is a huge benefit. Just knowing him and trusting him, being able to look at those pay apps and some of those things have been good. I think there's pieces of communication that can improve, probably both ways, whether that's MCL to us or us to BBH or MCL, whatever it is. For example, I didn't know that the north parking lot was going to be out of commission until I came up to work on Saturday and just went out because it was supposed to be poured on Friday, which is why everybody got a message on Sunday. Probably something they didn't really think about either because Brian wasn't scheduled to be on site on Friday and he's my primary point of contact. Kevin is on site every day, but he didn't really think about it, checking it before he left on Friday. So little communication pieces. It's a lot of work, but it's going to be a benefit to the kids. So let's get it done.
Questions for Brandon? Communications? 4.6, audience comments. Anyone? Hearing none, board committee reports. Of course, curriculum committee met. We haven't had a head start meeting, I'm guessing now through September. The other committees, policy committee, did have a meeting, that's not, that's it.
That was nice.
Anything foundation?
Foundation, yeah.
I missed it.
No, it's, they were just talk about the, what we call that gathering, all class reunion. That was that happened last Saturday. What other than that? Oh,
Bill Reese resigned.
Yeah, Bill Reese resigned, treasurer resigned. Bill done a great job.
Bill was not.
Pulling all his resource knowledge and his personal resources from the University of Nebraska Foundation to There was a question about that. Were you on that call, or I think you had a game? We are supposed to, is the Walton Public School Board appointing, are they to approve the new appointees, or can they, the foundation approve it? The school board just appoint a board member to the foundation?
I need to go back and look at the bylaws. I've got copies of those. I'll read through it. It shouldn't take long. I don't know off the top of my head.
We couldn't believe that you could make that guess when you were on the call. We figured you have an
I'll find out.
Alex, with Bill resigning, if we were working on a project with a donor, is that something that it'd be all right for me to just directly contact that donor, or is
He's still he's still got some time
Okay,
left.
perfect.
I think he's gonna
Perfect.
through it until we find.
Okay, okay.
Action items.
Quick question on the committees. National Honor Society, do we have a new teacher representative?
I only look because I hope Vernon was sitting over there. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll put it on my list.
Have you guys met yet?
No, I don't know who he is, but it was Kim Forbes,
Oh, yeah.
and so I haven't heard from anyone.
I know all the applications are going to Mr. Tom Jack, but I don't know if he's the official, because he was NHS before Mrs. Forbes. So I don't know if he's assisting somebody or if he's taking that back over. I'll find out.
Mr. Scoggins is involved as well, yeah. But Mr. Tom Jack is kind of coordinating the process.
Any other questions? Comments? 5.1, insurance renewal.
Okay, insurance renewal, met with Dan. Last month, there were some concerns about building value. So what the building value covers is the cost to rebuild the same building on the same site. The value that it was placed at for coverage initially was just over 71 million. MCL did some calculations about what that would take at present market, and it's about 74.5 million is the coverage that should be in place. So what Dan did is he put together a little cheat sheet with premium as far as what it looks like if we just stick with what we have at a $10,000 deductible, same wind and hail coverage. The left column is that value that he initially proposed. The right column is MCL's estimated value of where we should be at. And then below that, you'll see the $10,000 deductible, but there's also wind and hail coverage increasing from $25,000 to $50,000 to $75,000. So with each increase in the wind and hail deductible, that's going to drop your total premium going to our coverage. And I don't have a strong recommendation. Sat and talked with Dan. He said a lot of people are going to at least 25,000 on wind and hail, which obviously drops the premium and gets us close to where we were before. But this is a discussion for the board.
Can you clarify for Mike or Brandon? So when it says premium difference, is that 74,770? Is that compared to last year? Is that what we're talking about? Was there an
That's the
increase of
current
that?
premium right now.
That's just the initial value.
70.
That's not the difference. That's your
That's the premium.
starting
Right now,
point.
it's premium. 74,000 with a 10,000 deductible, 74,770 right now.
And the 10,000 deductible on hail, wind and hail as well in that first one?
Yeah, that's 2918 in savings to go to that.
Okay, thank
Just
you.
FYI, everybody, next year, everybody's gonna have this deductible or higher. We just know that. I can tell you the same thing. We haven't had a wind and hail claim in how many years? Have we ever had one?
I don't know if we
No. But
I don't know if we have since I've been here. I don't recall.
I'm just saying, and it's gonna have a cosmetic, I mean, it's metal, it's gonna have a cosmetic exclusion unless it ruins the integrity of the steel. They're not gonna pay anything. It's not exactly a lot of savings if you look at it the same way. What it's doing. Now, the deductible's still the same on a normal water pipe break, a fire, anything like that. It's just your weather related is where you're gonna see a higher deductible. But we do need to increase the value. I would recommend that, for sure. And if you want to take the hard deductible to offset the cost, we don't change, I'm good with that too.
Basically, we don't need to claim for 12 years. Depending on what you want to say. You take the difference times 12, you roughly get 25 grand the first line up. You take the difference times 12, you get roughly 50 grand. You take the difference times 12, you get 75. So, and the little biggie said, if you do it,
Is the nature of our roof that hail damage just doesn't happen?
The new
Correct. The new
Yeah.
roofs that they put on are
Yeah.
coating, a silicone coating,
Bounces off.
and
It would take, if it gets to that point, we're buying a whole new roof on that. On the roof currently, if it goes through that, we're filing a claim, we're getting a whole new roof on the whole thing.
and Tillotson is very vigilant about coming up more than once a year to check on us and fix things before they become problems.
and the coating of the roofs is cheaper to fix.
Yeah.
Your recommendation, Mike?
My recommendation, I leave it alone.
Do the 10,000 with the higher value?
If we want to take the chance of a hailstorm coming through and having 25, 7, 10, 16,000 additional money, so basically 5 years of savings. It would take 5 years to equal that difference. So,
Good with that. You making that motion? Is that good too?
I think you should be.
Yep, make a motion to take the $10,000 deductible with, as is. With higher value.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
Alex?
Yes.
Renee?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mike? Di?
Yes.
5.2, pay application number 4 for MCO.
Okay, I'm gonna start, and then I think Renee's got some input about conversations she's had with MCL. This last pay app, what I did is I went through and I looked at all the costs to subcontractors, separated that out from MCL's payroll itself. So the initial was 1.97 million on this pay app. 1.915 of that is the contract piece. $54,677.24 is the payroll portion of that. I'll let you talk about your conversations you've had with them and what we're looking for.
So, as I said at last month's meeting, I've been trying to get payroll reports to just verify what they're charging to us. And I have gotten some information, but the piece that I really wanted to see is what burden they were charging, or they call it fringes. And so I finally got that report, and I will tell you that number is a little over 78%. So it's basically, if I'm paying you $25 an hour, what they're charging to us is $25 plus 78% on top of that. And there's always a burden, right? Because you've got payroll taxes, you have benefits, you have things like that. I'm more familiar with about a 35% burden rate. So I did ask them to provide more detail on, okay, how did we get there? And we need to have additional conversations, and it might make sense for the building committee to actually get together and look at this more carefully, because based on what I'm seeing, they are including some things in their burden that are overhead. They're simply not recoverable under the terms of the contract. One example of that is training and technology at 20%, and that is specifically called out in the contract as being part of their overhead. There are some other issues with so we just need more information and haven't been able to pull that all together. But it's just something I personally am not comfortable until I can see what are we being charged for. And at $55,000, that doesn't, those aren't significant dollars, but multiply that times 24 months, right? And you're over $1 million in labor, and if that burden rate is too high, you're talking about maybe a couple $100,000, which that's real money to me, and something else that we could do in terms of the project. So my recommendation, based on the fact that we have not gotten resolution, would be to approve the pay app minus that $54,000 odd dollars, because obviously they need to be able to pay their subcontractors and equipment suppliers and all of that stuff. Let's just, if we could carve that out, approve the rest, and then give us some time. We now have another 30 days for them to keep providing information to us so we can just get comfortable. What I've told them, this is really kind of a one-time process. Once we can get comfortable with those percentages of burden, then that's really simple math every single month on the labor dollars. So.
While not apples to apples, I did a quick calc for Renee as far as school district, what our burden rate looks like, and it's 30 to 40%. So that 35 that she's talking about is pretty spot on for what we're doing too.
That's just for the work that MCL awarded themselves.
Yeah, basically they're, well, not only awarded, but like on their superintendent, their project manager, all their people assigned to the project. Yeah.
So the number you have in front of you is minus deducted amount.
She made the motion.
So the value of the motion will be $1,915,920.74. And that is the total pay app minus the payroll expenses.
Say that number one more time.
Yeah,
Because ours is
that's wrong.
1,778,250.67 on the.
Okay, give me just a minute here.
Charges overages.
I missed it.
Charges overages.
That's a big old review.
While he's looking for that, they seem to be more receptive this time, a little more interactive.
Yes, I was able to talk to their controller as well as Tony, the owner. And some of it is just, I'll give you an example. One of their burden items is small tools that they're charging as a percentage of labor dollars. And that is recoverable under the contract under a different line item, and they have to use a little different method to prove that up. So really, it's just, let's follow the contract. The other thing they're including in burden is all of their insurance. So they're charging that as a percentage of labor dollars, and that's also recoverable, but in a different section of the contract and with a different prove-up method. So it's just some of those things, and I will tell you, what they're doing is not uncommon, but it's why we spend as much time on this contract, drafting it, so all of that stuff would be completely
So
transparent.
if you're a vet person, by next month, I'll get what you exactly want.
I think so.
Yeah, because we're holding back money, and people love money, so.
Right. Well, and we also we're gonna have to go back and true up all the prior pay apps.
Right.
Once we get to that agreed upon percentage, and that's where it might make some sense for the committee, for us to get on a Zoom call or something with them, and just let them walk through it, and we can say, okay, we're comfortable with that, or we have additional questions, in particular on the percentage they're using for GL or comp umbrella. I don't know if that's the right number, but you would know if that's the right number, so.
Okay, so I've got a discrepancy here. When I look at the cover page, which I use for what BVH has approved, what Russ has approved, that number is $1,778,250.67, which I think is the amount in there. When I go down to the line item totals, they come out to $1,970,597.98. And I'm not sure where that discrepancy
Probably retainage.
is.
Is that a retainage difference? I don't know, but Brandon, where are you getting that second number? Which page?
I'm on page. I'm at the bottom of page 7. Should be a double line right before their payroll copies.
That's what they asked for, I said they had never come to figure out this.
Yeah.
I didn't say that's what.
Brandon, what do you come up with the differences? What? Do you know?
I don't, because the line item sheet does not match that cover page. I did my calculations off the line item sheet.
Cover page, what we did. Yeah, that's all.
And is that,
They can figure it out.
Yeah, I
does the number, is that 1.7 take out the 54,000 that we're proposing tonight?
It does not.
So I would move to pay the cover page amount minus the 54,000.
Just for clarification, that is exactly what it is. So that was their total cost, they have to hold 10% retainage. So they can only bill us for the 90% of those costs that you were looking at on their page.
It's
The 1.77.
It's the one.
So we got to deduct the 50.
That's why my number come up, whatever we have.
So, these, make your motions again.
We need another. Brandon?
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to where I was.
I didn't know what that 54, what was that?
That number is $54,677.24.
So just put that down here. Okay, so it looks like, make a motion to approve $1,723,573.43.
I'll second
Any discussion? Super Chris?
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Yes.
Alex.
Save money, don't want to let it get out the door.
English 11 curriculum. We had the discussion, right?
Yep, sorry. Per the earlier discussion, though, the recommendation at this time would be to approve the initial 13 weeks as proposed on the attached English 11 scope and sequence, and then continue discussing the remaining weeks at a future meeting of the board's Curriculum and American Civics Committee. And then at that point, we would bring that back to the full board.
Is there a motion? Make a motion. Josh, first 13 weeks.
First 13.
First 13 weeks. Curriculum sequence.
I'll second.
Any further discussion or questions? Chris?
Mike,
Yes.
Di,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Policies, we talked about that already.
If you want to provide any feedback on policies between now and the next meeting, I can at least have some prepared, that way we can approve next month.
the next meeting?
Once I get clarification on that postcard meeting, I will have a better idea what the budget looks like. As far as timeline, last year with the postcard meeting, we had to come back with a special meeting to actually approve the budget. If those timelines are out the window and we can just do it at the regular meeting, I would recommend doing that.
Library, also represent 6037, correct? Yep. Anything else? Next meeting?
Additional English 11.
The rest of it.
Yep.
The next 13 weeks.
Yeah.
The rest of you, the rest of you guys.
So we're ready for that within 2 months?
Motion to adjourn.